Hello! As I'm recording this, my video on Godzilla X Kong, the second in my Great Ron series, should be premiering. Be interesting to see how that goes. This was meant to be my rest day, as I've been quite ill, haven't got much sleep, I'm incredibly tired, but I decided, now I'm thinking was a bad idea, to put on Zimzilla's podcast, live stream, what have you, where he examines Little Platoon's video on Godzilla X Kong. Since the video has been out, people have been asking me my opinion on it, and I didn't want to go and watch the video myself because I wasn't really that interested in hearing what Little Platoon had to say about it, because he's not a MonsterVerse fan, he probably doesn't really care about the film, so he's probably not got that much interesting to say about it that we as kaiju fans would have to say about it. But people kept asking, so I thought, you know what, let's watch Zimzilla's live stream about it, because then I'm giving my views to somebody who I actually give two shits about. But Zimzilla got only seconds into Little Platoon's video, and I had to stop, because there is no way I could not respond to this myself. And I was initially going to do this as a live reaction type thing, i.e. I would play the video, then stop it and react to whatever has just been said, you know, like Defaq fashion. But the video is so dense that I found myself struggling to get all the points. So I have been, for the past God knows how long, going through this Little Platoon video bit by bit, writing down everything he has to say that has annoyed me or made me want to say something or strangle a kitten. Now, to be fair, some of it does make sense. It's not a lot of it, but some of it. And for anybody who's going to be watching my breakdown, reaction, whatever the hell I'm going to call this, of Little Platoon's video, if they're hoping to see me go through Little Platoon's points about Godzilla X Kong, I'm going to tell you now, that ain't happening. I get to, exactly, 9 minutes in, and 9 minutes in he still hasn't talked about Godzilla X Kong. He's sort of mentioned its name a few times, but he's not actually talked about the film. And he says something at the 9-minute mark, which is very oof. So, with that foreknowledge, let us begin on this nice little journey through Little Platoon's video.
This film is a fucking disaster.
Agreed.
We should probably be clear, the entire MonsterVerse, with the arguable exceptions of Skull Island and that Godzilla movie from 2014, yeah, the entire thing besides those two is a fucking disaster.
Citation needed. Also, I do like the fact that he says the entire thing is a fucking disaster, quote unquote, then says, oh, except these two. But the MonsterVerse has 5 films in it. So 2 out of 5 aren't terrible, but the whole thing is a disaster. By your own, well, he gets into this in a bit, but by your own sort of logic, that's 2/5 of the series is good. So how does that count as the whole thing being terrible? Jesus Christ.
Its target audience is made up almost exclusively of brain-dead morons, and people who are careless about their children, so take them to the movies ensuring that they too can grow up to become brain-dead morons.
I like to think I have more than 2 brain cells to rub together. Also, that's not exactly the best thing to put at the 1 minute 25 mark in your video. People who might like Godzilla X Kong might come to this video going, you know, someone might have some opinions about this, some details or so. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I have a wrong opinion and he might inform me differently. Then before you've actually started talking about the film, you've said, yeah, they're a bunch of morons. That's not going to incentivize them to stay and watch, is it?
There are two typical defenses made for schlock of this sort. Some will say that, well, they're only in it for the monster fights, and so that's fine. Others will make the broader point that it's just a blockbuster, and not everything can be Shakespeare, so stop complaining. Why do you hate fun?
Ooh, look at him pulling out the flaccid guns. Why do people who try to criticize Godzilla X Kong is an open goal, and somehow, Little Platoon is headbutting the corner post. Not even the goal post, the corner post. I definitely meant to say that.
So whenever a new, expensive, terrible film comes out that involves monsters or dinosaurs or giant robots, we are apparently expected to put up with a whole bunch of people who are, shall we say, homo without the sapiens, and who tell us that we aren't allowed to be mean about the terrible films they consume because in effect they are meant to be bad. That's what makes them so good.
I wrote this line down when I heard it, and I've been staring at it wondering why I did, because this isn't really an anything point. Then I realised it's the line, we have to put up with people. So, what? Why? At what point did anybody say, you have to respect these people's opinions? You have to listen to them? No. No one ever said that. No one is making you do that. What the fuck are you talking about? People have stupid opinions, and you're supposed to be here to prove them wrong. So far, at the 2-minute mark, you ain't done shit.
Neither of these arguments are accepted by those who offer them when the subject is a film they dislike, of course. Both strands of this defense of the cretinous are severely deficient.
Agreed, which is why I find it odd that you're bringing them up. These are the bog basic arguments that people who aren't really thinking about film in general might say in response to somebody saying this film is bad. So for Little Platoon to be harping on these points like they are the grand jewel in the crown of people defending films like Godzilla X Kong, it's very odd. It's almost like he hasn't put any effort in. I wonder if we're going to see evidence of that later.
In the first place, you might just be in it for the big monster battles, yet the MonsterVerse films in particular average, an 80-20 split? If you're lucky, 20% of the film might be big CGI monsters fighting each other, but the remaining 80% is invariably taken up by human plot lines that would depress a room full of monkeys on typewriters. Why must we use the typewriters, they frustratedly ask, when these guys just throw shit at the paper and run with whatever sticks?
While we are throwing random shit at the wall...
See? Even the film accepts that this is what it's doing. This movie doesn't respect you.
I'm finding this very fascinating. I watch EFAP and I know that they say occasionally that when you pause what somebody is saying, so when someone's on a diatribe and they're just talking and talking and talking and talking, you have to sort of scoop in what they're saying as quick as you can to get the next bit that comes in. But when you pause them and listen to individual lines, you can find some really, in this case, stupid stuff. I.e., the MonsterVerse films are an 80-20 split between 20% monster fights and 80% depressing human drama that is like throwing shit at the wall. And again, we link this back to the MonsterVerse is terrible except for 2 out of the 5 films. So 20% of the MonsterVerse... 20%? That's not right. 40% of the MonsterVerse is fine. Or good. So it's like, well, hang on a minute. The first 2 films are good, according to you. And those 2 films started off people's interest with the MonsterVerse. And indeed kick-started a lot of people's dying passion for monster films. So if they are an 80-20 split and people like them, and you think they're good, how can you call it depressing human plot lines? How can you call it throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks? How can you call it that when you yourself said those films are good? I don't get it. Personally, I include Godzilla King of the Monsters in the good MonsterVerse films, so for me it's a 60% good films ratio. And if you want evidence for that, I have a 2-hour video for you to watch. If you don't want to watch 2 hours of it because for some reason you can't press pause, I have the exact same video broken down into about 10 parts. So yeah, go watch that. You'll have a better time than watching this. Editing me here. I just wanted to point out something I didn't really mention in yesterday's recording of this original audio. I don't use this word lightly, but little Platoon is being a condescending little cunt in this video. He's already called fans of the film brain-dead morons, which is immediately going to put them off wanting to watch the rest of the video. He's then gone on a diatribe about how stupid they are, about how terrible their arguments are, and then he's got to this point and he's talking to them like children, and he's like, oh, the film doesn't respect you. Why talk like that to people? Well, this is the interesting thing, isn't it? Does he think people who like this film are still watching his video? If he does, he is incredibly delusional. If he doesn't, then who is he talking to? There's something wrong with this guy.
There's absolutely no cast iron rule that states monster movies have to have terribly written human plots. Every single monster movie with terribly written human plots would be improved by better human plots.
Yes, it would. This is something that has been said a lot in past years. It's almost like you're coming to this completely fresh with no idea of what people have been talking about and you're just spouting the first things that come to your head. Why do people keep doing this?
This is how we can say that Godzilla -1 is better than anything the MonsterVerse has to offer.
Oh look, he's watched one Godzilla film and he thinks that one's the good one. Jesus Christ. It's almost a meme that people in the kaiju community, in the monster community, in the Godzilla community, said that they weren't going to compare Godzilla -1 to Godzilla X Kong because the films are so different and are aiming for completely different things that there is really no point comparing them. But you can, if you want to. It's kind of a useless exercise because what's the point? Where what you should actually be doing is, examining Godzilla X Kong and saying, okay, this is why Godzilla X Kong is bad. It's almost... Oh, Jesus Christ. Again, we're 3 minutes into this video and he still hasn't talked about Godzilla X Kong.
That Godzilla 2014 is better than Godzilla X Kong.
Agreed.
That Jurassic Park is better than Jurassic World, and that Jaws is better than Meg 2 The Trench. Which leads us neatly into the second strand of this audience retardation.
I find it very interesting that he bleeps the word retard, but leaves in all the other swear words. It's almost as if he knows that is a word he shouldn't be using as an insult, but at the same time can't stop himself from saying it. If only I had some more evidence for a certain way of thinking. Oh well, let's carry on.
It's only a blockbuster, don't you see? Blockbusters are not Shakespeare, as though the great playwrights didn't aim for big summer grand slams themselves. But anyway, this idea that simply being a blockbuster in some way makes a film immune to the usual standards of criticism is dumb for a host more obvious reasons. Before this film released, I had half a mind to make a lengthy comparison with Godzilla -1, since -1 is a wonderful film, and the MonsterVerse generally is the cinematic equivalent of an enema.
Once again, leaning into the Godzilla -1 meme, and again, 40% of the MonsterVerse is good, therefore it's generally a cinematic enema. How does that work?
But -1 is much more a genre piece than it is a blockbuster. -1 uses Godzilla sparingly and as a kind of mythic representation of a lost war. Godzilla in -1 is the psychological Earth threat, and the film is pretty well exclusively a character study, concerning itself with how specific people react to loss and with how a culture redeems itself after the great defeat. Godzilla in -1 is the embodiment of the alien victor, almost a surrogate for the Allied forces and the new world they forced upon an isolated people.
I was so close to complimenting him on this for looking at a Godzilla film and saying, oh, here is a really detailed analysis of what is otherwise a big monster film. Then he said, Jesus Christ, let me say it again. The embodiment of the alien victor, a surrogate for the Allied forces, and the new world they forced upon an isolated people. What the fuck? Do you have any idea what Imperial Japan was like pre the Second World War? Do you have any idea of the brutalist empirical invasions of other cultures and countries around Japan that the Japanese Empire took part in? Taking something as unapologetically monstrous as the Japanese Empire back then, and somehow turning it into an innocent victim? What the fuck? Literally, as I was saying this, I started thinking about the idea of Godzilla representing America and thinking, it doesn't really. He attacks America. He might represent the nuclear bomb, but that's a whole different thing. Then I started thinking, oh, well, he represents the ghost of war, really. I said, well, Japan, Imperial Japan was really monstrous. Does Godzilla represent Japan as much as he does the Americans? And then you think about it for more than 5 seconds, little Platoon, and you realise, no, Godzilla isn't representing a specific country, he's representing war as a concept. The growing threat, the ever-present threat, and the extremes which people have to go to avoid it. In some cases, actually taking part in it, fire for fire type thing. Godzilla Minus One is good. Some of its interpretations, like this one, are not.
Defeating Godzilla is a story of indirect redemption. Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts.
Sorry, what? Failure is not fatal? I'm pretty sure a giant dinosaur blasting you with a nuclear heat ray is pretty fucking fatal. What the f... Oh my god, he's giving me a headache. I'm supposed to be recovering from an illness, not getting a new one. And also, the story of indirect redemption. That's literally Godzilla King of the Monsters, if you paid attention to the human writing. Again, I haven't seen Little Platoon's analysis of Godzilla King of the Monsters. I don't know if he has one. I know Defaq has one. It's not very good. It's shit, if I'm being honest. But yeah, that's in there. It's pretty fucking clear. They actually spell it out at one point for people who don't get it. Jesus Christ.
It is a truly excellent film, and it's not completely incomparable to blockbuster entertainment. It shares many points of commonality with Jaws. It is, essentially, Jaws with socio-historical context, whereas Jaws was primarily concerned with individual characters on the local scale, and Jaws became known as the first summer blockbuster. It's the socio-historical point that differentiates the two and makes Minus One less useful as a comparator with the blockbuster category in general, because the importance of its historical grounding, as well as its foreign language and its specific cultural trappings, make it less universal in its appeal.
There's a sparkle of a point here. A foreign language film with specific cultural trappings won't necessarily appeal to a grand audience. However, this is a Godzilla film. At this point, you can put Godzilla on anything, and it will draw in audiences. Hell, Godzilla x Kong probably got more people going to it than would have, because Godzilla's in it. If you just called it Kong the New Empire, there'd probably be a lot less appeal to go and see it. The only reason Godzilla Minus One wasn't a blockbuster, I was going to say summer blockbuster, but I don't think you've actually said that. The reason Godzilla Minus One wasn't a blockbuster, or definitely wasn't in comparison to a lot of other films, is because Toho have a very weird thing when it comes to their films being released elsewhere. Like Shin Godzilla, I don't even think it was released in Britain. I don't remember it being released. I never saw it in the cinema. That film was one of their most successful films and one of the films that really got people talking about the Godzilla franchise again. It was a terrible attempt at copying Godzilla 2014, but still. So this idea that Godzilla -1 didn't get as much as it deserved because it was culturally different is kind of flawed when you actually look into what happened with it. But then Little Platoon isn't doing that, is he?
It objectively does character, romance, world-building, kaiju, and arguably even action better than any MonsterVerse movie if your definition of action rests on action having a point and a purpose.
Citation needed? Granted, you need to have actually watched and paid attention to the films to be able to make a citation, i.e., action that has a point. Can you give me a reference? Can you point out a fight in one of the MonsterVerse films where the fight doesn't have a point? But he doesn't, because he's just... he's throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. Isn't that ironic?
Which would make it a useful comparator when looking at the individual elements of any movie. But I'm going to resist the urge to do any point-for-point contrast in this video. That's in part because the MonsterVerse generally, and Godzilla x Kong specifically, is just not worth the effort.
Not worth the effort, eh? Could you have just skipped all of this then? Could you have just not bothered mentioning all this and actually got to breaking down Godzilla x Kong? So far, he's said something incredibly stupid regarding the Japanese in the Second World War. He's alienated anybody who potentially might have been informed about how Godzilla x Kong is a bad film. And now he's saying, yeah, all this stuff I've just said, yeah, just ignore that, it's not worth it. Why mentioning it?
In part because I can't be bothered to deal with all the comments telling me that these are different films trying to do different things, so they can't be compared at all.
Oh, he's got that point in there. I don't like the fact that he mentions it with this almost dismissive tone, like hand-wavy type thing, like, oh yeah, people will say this. But it's a point, though. Just dismissing it offhand because you don't want to address it doesn't make it any less of a point. There is a literal phrase comparing apples to oranges. You can't dismiss that phrase because you don't like it. It is a phrase, and it's a phrase for a reason. You can't compare Godzilla -1 to Godzilla x Kong because they are so different. And in a lot of respects, they don't have the same stuff in them. Which is this is actually kind of funny. A couple of lines before this, he says that you can break down a film enough. You can break down Godzilla -1 enough to the point where you can compare it to almost any film. At which point, what's the worth in that? If you can compare it to almost anything, where's the value? Is there? How far down can you break something before it is broken? This is a much more interesting question that could be discussed, but that won't get him clicks, so you can carry on spouting bullshit.
And in part because there's more than enough for which to bully Godzilla x Kong without going for the nuclear option that comparison entails.
Yes, there is. It'd be nice if you'd get to it already. We're 5 minutes in. We're 5.5 minutes in. He still hasn't started talking about Godzilla x Kong. What the fuck are you doing?
Get on with it.
Get on with it!
Yes, get on with it!
It's absolutely true that the blockbuster tends to be defined by its general mass appeal. These are the filmic all-rounders. They tend to have a little bit of everything: action, romance, comedy, tragedy.
Okay, I was going to ignore this because it's not really much of a muchness what he's saying. But the visuals of what he's putting on the screen whilst he's talking do not match what he's talking about. Let me play you it again and then watch what comes up on the screen.
They tend to have a little bit of everything: action, romance, comedy, tragedy.
Action, romance, comedy, tragedy.
I'm going to mention this now. Little Platoon has said before that he has a team of editors. And at the start of this video, in the section I skipped because why the fuck would I want to watch bullshit? I'm watching this video, what am I talking about? At the start of this video, there's just a 15 or so second clip of a dog in a bed, and it just says, I put a picture of my dog in the bed because I didn't know what to put in here, the editor. You have a team of editors who can't be bothered to put stuff in your video and can't even find relevant clips to put into your video for things that you are saying. Why are you paying these people? Actually, that would be a question. Are you paying these people? And this actually goes back to something he was doing earlier. He was talking about fights having a purpose. He said the MonsterVerse fights didn't have a purpose. Well, he insinuated that MonsterVerse fights didn't have a purpose whilst Godzilla Minus One's fights did. But all he showed for that was clips from Godzilla Minus One, specifically trailer clips. He could have, if he wanted to make the point without actually talking about it, he could have put visuals in there to represent the things that he's talking about, thereby referencing something that we can then examine. But he didn't. Or specifically, his editors didn't. Because apparently his editors are those monkeys on those typewriters. And then it just goes more into the point of, he's saying a lot of stuff in here. He's making declarative statements about the MonsterVerse, the fans, and he's not offering any evidence for it. I don't know if he's done another video on any of the other MonsterVerse films. Do I want to go and look? But if this is like the first video he's done and he wants to introduce people to the MonsterVerse, this is by far the worst way of doing it. Because he's not offering any evidence for it. He's just saying, I think it's bad. Could you tell us anything about it? No. Jesus Christ, this video's giving me a headache. No, stop.
The broadest range to hold the broadest appeal. None of these components might be quite so well done, so fleshed out as in a more particular genre film, though the best blockbusters typically do excel in every element. But the point is that blockbuster entertainment is not synonymous with dumb. Popularity does not entail mindlessness.
Agreed. On your last point, you've also shot yourself in the foot again, but we'll get to that. A blockbuster isn't inherently dumb. They are generally, there's almost like a minimum standard of good that films have to meet so that they can be considered good. But in a lot of people's more recent opinions, if you slap the title dumb or silly film onto a film, that standard just disappears. To the point where they could be watching fireworks on the big screen and they can come out and say, wow, that was an amazing film. But these big blockbuster films, even that needs clarification, doesn't it? What blockbuster films? What films are we talking about here that you're saying are dumb films? Again, it needs citations. But generally speaking, every film needs a certain level of writing or character arcs and stuff like that for it to be entertaining and to be able to follow along with it. It's only in more recent years, with the fall of the MCU, for instance, where the quality of writing and character work and whatnot has dropped so dramatically. Because, Jesus Christ, this makes me feel old. The MCU is almost 20 years old. Jesus. There have been people who have been watching the MCU all of their lives, and they might consider that to be the standard of filmmaking. So where it's dropped off more recently, they might think, yeah, that's what films are supposed to be like. When in fact, the standard of the city films, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is a film that is essentially a bunch of medieval themed sketches roughly sewn together. But that film makes a certain amount of sense narratively for people to follow along with what's going on. If that film made absolutely no sense whatsoever, then people wouldn't have liked them that much. By comparison, Godzilla vs. Kong, you watch it and you think, this makes a sort of sense. I didn't. I immediately saw it and went, this is absolute shit. But there are some people who watch it and go, yeah, there's some sort of sense to this. But then you start looking into it and realise it's got so many cracks in it, it's not a road anymore. It's patches of tarmac. What was the point I was making? Alright, blockbusters aren't inherently stupid. I agree with Little Platoon on that bit. The bit I don't agree with him with, and the bit that he's basically torn apart the point of now, he said that blockbusters don't do every aspect of filmmaking Great. So if you did what you said you were going to do earlier, and break down Godzilla -1 to the point where you will be able to compare it to basically anything, and then break down Godzilla X Con and do a 1-to-1 comparison with Godzilla -1, then could you do the same with almost any film? Again, we need examples of blockbusters. Would -1 still hold up? Would the blockbusters hold up? Would tearing off little non-contextual pieces of a piece of art and holding it up to other bits of artwork actually be of any worth? Or is it just a wasteful thought exercise that you dismiss almost immediately because you look at Godzilla -1 and Godzilla X Con, realise just how completely different these two films are, and say no, there's no point. Only to then bring up that you were thinking of doing that, but people are annoying. I'm so dismissive. Whoever suggested I should be watching this video, I'm gonna come for you. Not like that.
The audience has never looked at the truly great blockbusters throughout history and demanded they be made dumber. The biggest and the best blockbusters, the ones we remember most fondly, are remembered because they are good, not because they are supposed to be bad. If Godzilla -1 were an English-language film, if it was slightly less reliant on the specifics of another culture's history, and if it were published in the summer by a major studio, I suspect that, like Jaws, we would now be calling it a blockbuster. It's not, so we aren't, but any list of the great blockbusters rather bolsters the point. How many of the following were good because they were supposed to be shit? Die Hard, Men in Black, Terminator 2, Blade Runner, Saving Private Ryan, Spider-Man 2, Jurassic Park, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Babe, The Iron Giant, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, Chicken Run, Empire Strikes Back, Avengers, Aliens, WALL-E, Jaws, The Dark Knight, Finding Nemo, E.T., and Kevin Bacon. These are all blockbusters. Very many of them are the sorts of films you take the kids to see, and absolutely none of them has to be defended by hordes of absolute on the grounds that they are meant to be bad because they are blockbusters.
Oh my god, he's made citations. I mean, that's good. I mean, it means I can have a look at some of these maybe and find out if they still stand up. I will point out that Spider-Man 2 was in there. I also noticed he used the word retard again and had to bleep it out. Surely this was scripted. In which case, why didn't you just go back and re-record that bit and get rid of... And of course, the overall point of all this is the same tired argument that I pointed out earlier was a really basic argument that people who don't really know what they're talking about would use. There's so many better arguments out there. Specifically for the Monsterverse, I would argue my head off about Godzilla killing the monsters. Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla X Con, absolutely terrible films. Tear into them. But don't keep using a bad argument that anybody can argue against. It just makes you look like you've shoved a pike up a straw man and you're carrying him around going, look, I killed the dragon.
In short, Godzilla X Kong has no excuse. If you like kaiju films, if you think kids deserve good entertainment, the best entertainment, since it's the most important at that formative stage in their lives, if you want big things smashing into each other, if you want CGI extravaganzas, if you want your favorite big monsters to get the mainstream love you think they deserve, then you should want this film to be better. You should not be excusing it because it's meant to be bad.
Yes. What? He's right. If a film is bad, you shouldn't be going, oh, it's fine. You should be pointing out where it's bad. In my latest video, I point out the good stuff. There is some good stuff in Godzilla X Con, but I'm pointing out the fact that it's a overall very bad film, and that we shouldn't be accepting a very bad film. We should be pointing out it's bad and saying, we want this instead. This was good. And if we can say why something was good, then more people can go, oh yeah, that was good, wasn't it? No, yeah, that was bad, wasn't it? And that's what we're trying to do here, just point out the good, point out the bad, try and get some positive influences going.
Nobody suffers when a film is better. Culture generally suffers when its biggest budget productions are this kind of bilge.
Again, can't really argue with this. This is true. Stories last longer than people. Some of the oldest texts that we have are stories that people wrote thousands of years ago. Am I right in saying the Rosetta Stone was a story about Ramses? Like, he had a great victory, so they wrote down his victory and then translated it into different languages and sent that around the kingdom to be like, look how awesome our king was. The first thing most people will probably think of when they talk about Greece, more likely as not, it's going to be Zeus, Hercules, the Hydra, stuff like that. Ancient myths and legends, stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. When we talk about our favourite films, we say, oh yes, the Laurel and Hardy films. Oh, they were brilliant. These ones where he does this and oh, he knocks him with this, oh, and he eats that, and those are the films people will talk about because they're so good. They'll pass them down the line. I don't think anyone's going to be talking about Godzilla X Kong after a year. Maybe not even that. They'll probably forget it exists right up until the next MonsterVerse film comes out, and then people will start remembering that Godzilla X Kong was a thing. Of course, depending on what happens with the MonsterVerse, you might get a third Adam Wingard film, in which case, Jesus Christ. I keep asking for Jesus. Jesus won't help. Yogg-Sothoth bleach my brain. Or they'll get another director in, and it will be a completely different MonsterVerse film, and people will be going, yeah, GXK was terrible, wasn't it? And again, this comes back to pointing out the bad and the good, and influencing culture for that way. This stuff needs to be done.
And if you acknowledge any of the preceding list as being better than Godzilla X Kong, then, much like all those people from whom I had to drag the conclusion that Jurassic Park is better than Jurassic World Dominion...
Wait, what? You had to drag an opinion out of... When did this happen? Was this on Twitter or something? Oh, no, hold on. Are you saying this happened in this video? To someone watching this video didn't realise Jurassic World... I was going to say Jurassic World Dominion, but just Jurassic World is worse than Jurassic Park. They didn't realise that until they watched this video and you told them. Is that what you're assuming? Because, mate, they would not have got anywhere near that far into this video because of the bullshit you've been spouting. Oh, everybody who likes these films is a brain-dead moron. 1 minute in. Yeah, because people who like these films are definitely going to stay after that. You fucking wanker.
You are beginning to engage the very critical faculties you insist do not apply to blockbusters. TLDR, have some self-respect and stop watching this absolute dog shit.
In isolation, this line is good. He has put it in completely the wrong place at the... Oh my Jesus. Shove Niggurath, give me strength. At the 8-minute, 13-second mark into his breakdown of Godzilla X Kong, Little Platoon says, TLDR. Put that at the start, you fucking moron. You brain-dead moron, apparently. Am I subscribed to him? I don't think I will be after this.
I don't think there's much point doing any lengthy recap of the MonsterVerse story, because I've got a Dune video to get back to after this, and none of it makes any sense anyway.
Point the first. Little Platoon has made the mistake that a lot of other YouTube video critiques... YouTube film critiques have, in that they haven't paid attention to a certain aspect of the film, so they can't say anything about it. If you haven't already, go watch my Godzilla reviews video, where I break down a lot of people's critiques of Godzilla King of the Monsters and point out that a lot of them simply do not remember the film, possibly because they weren't paying attention to it. Little Platoon seems to have done the same thing. He says the stories don't make sense. He doesn't give any evidence for that, he just says they don't make sense. If he were to give evidence, he would probably give away the fact that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, and think less of his opinions. But if he did actually go back and watch the films to find out the plots and whatnot, he would discover that they have plots and whatnot, and then wouldn't be able to say that they don't make any sense. Point the second, he says he likes 2 of the MonsterVerse films. There are 5 MonsterVerse films, which means he likes 40% of the MonsterVerse. almost half. So according to him, almost half of the Monsterverse has good writing. And yet he says none of it makes any sense. Little Platoon. Redraft, mate.
Because it's meant to be bad and therefore it's good. Am I doing this right?
No.
Suffice it to say that there are big monsters and Godzilla is king of the monsters. He and Kong defeated Mecha Streisand in the previous film, because some evil people had the evil idea that we might need a weapon to fight against these big monsters, rather than leaving it to the big monsters to police themselves, at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars in property damage and tens of thousands of lives lost each year.
So I made a video called He's Not Here to Save You, which is talking about how the monsters in the Monsterverse, and specifically Godzilla, aren't there to save people, they're there to save the world. And there's a very big difference between those two things. It's kind of funny that one of the most famous lines from Godzilla 2014 is about the arrogance of man, and yet when people watch these films, all they can think about is, why aren't the monsters saving us? There might be a reason for that. But sticking closer to the topic at hand, remember I said that if Little Platoon said anything about the plots of the Monsterverse, that we would immediately know that he's talking bullshit? So yeah, he's talking bullshit. He said tens of thousands of people die every year. Where did he get that from? Godzilla 2014 happened in, surprisingly enough, 2014. And then Godzilla King of the Monsters happened in 2019. There was a 5-year gap between those two films. Where did he get tens of thousands every year? More to the point, in those two films, the cities were evacuated. There were some people left, but it was majoritively evacuated. So again, where is he getting those numbers from? Godzilla vs. Kong, I would absolutely agree with him with, but that film is shit. So yeah, like I said, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Also, there's this place called Hollow Earth that the humans have discovered, and Kong lives there now.
Why does he say that so dismissively? There's a place called the Hollow Earth? He says that like it's such an alien concept that it's come out of nowhere. You do realise they've been hinting at this since Kong Skull Island. You know, that film that you like. They mention it in Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then they completely retrofit it for Godzilla vs. Kong. But even if you ignore the films, the Hollow Earth is a conspiracy theory that I'm sure everybody knows to an extent. There's loads of films about it as well, old films. I don't understand. He's saying it really dismissively, like he said the comment earlier very dismissively. Because he's trying to get across to you that these things are bad, when they're not. He's trying to influence you with tone. What you need to do, as an audience, is not listen to the tone, but listen to him. Oh, he's going to love this. Little Platoon is starting to remind me of Movie Bob.
One of the humans is a mystical, deaf, Indian kind of child.
What the fuck? Let me just go through those points. Mystical? Why is she mystical? You don't know that until you watch Godzilla X Kong, and you haven't started analysing Godzilla X Kong yet, so why do you think she's mystical? There might be a reason, we'll get to that in a second. She's deaf? Yes. To be fair, I can't really complain about that. That's a significant plot point of Godzilla vs. Kong, her being deaf. So pointing that out is good. It means he was actually paying attention to something when watching the Monsterverse. Why did he feel the need to call her Indian? Seriously, Little Platoon, what the fuck?
With psychic powers, and though she's absolutely not a character, and she has the expressive range of old toast, she is most definitely important, so I'm sure we'll have to suffer more human anti-drama in the film that's good if you ignore the 80% of it that's human anti-drama, and you just focus on the giant monsters or whatever.
And we're going to leave it there at the 9-minute 15-second mark, because Jesus Christ, this video is so dense the Juggernaut couldn't walk through it. And just to point out, he still hasn't started talking about Godzilla X Kong. Well, supposedly hasn't. He's mentioning stuff about Jaya's character. That's her name, by the way. And yes, she is a character. She's mentioning stuff about Jaya's character, which isn't in Godzilla vs. Kong, but is in Godzilla X Kong. So already he's going to be confusing people who haven't watched the films. But then on top of that, he's referring to Godzilla X Con as being an 80-20 split film, which it absolutely isn't. There is no way you can say that. The human drama is purely about the monsters. There's one or two lines in the entire film that isn't the humans talking about the monsters. So the idea of boring human drama or anti-drama, whatever the hell he said, that's just not a thing. So basically, within the space of a few seconds, he's trying to play off information from Godzilla X Con and information from other films and play them against each other to mix into a pot of, effectively, steaming bullshit. And just to go through those points, Jaya being psychic is in Godzilla X Con, not Godzilla vs. Kong. She's not a character, yes she fucking is. She's pivotal to the plot of Godzilla vs. Kong. That film is terrible, but you can't argue that she's not a character in it. If she wasn't in it, that plot basically wouldn't happen. The expressive range of Old Toast. Did you watch the... No, he didn't. He didn't watch the film. Why do I ask that? And she's most definitely important. She was in Godzilla vs. Kong. If you remembered the story, you might have remembered that, but you don't because you've been talking bullshit this whole video. I say the whole video. The whole 9 minutes and 15 seconds of the start of this video, which by all rights I shouldn't have got anywhere near. Right, not only did I manage to miss the premiere of my own video, but I also managed to cough up both my lungs, regrow a third one and then cough that up as well. I hope everybody is happy with this and that maybe, this might get around enough that people will start to notice that maybe some people's opinions aren't necessarily worth listening to. Right, that's a lot. See you later. Oh, and last but not least, thank you for watching.